Ms. Gertha Haddock Robinson.
Good afternoon. I guess us as the group who are my age can't say we were actually born in Punta Gorda because we had to go to Fort Myers to be born. But I grew up here. This is hometown to me. Punta Gorda, Florida, and you leave it for a while, but you have to come back to it. Basically, to say that I went to school here the first 8 years. My 9th grade year, we went 1 year in Fort Myers, Florida, because at that time, that was just before desegregation, but the last year, just before the desegregation, that the original 5 were brought back to Punta Gorda. I started Charlotte High in September of 1963 and graduated in June of '65. I went on from there and became a student at Bethune-Cookman College, the University of Florida, the University of South Florida. Was that enough schooling? I thought so. But I had the Wanderlust after that and went on and spent a year in Europe. Spent a year in Napoli, Italy. And from there I came back and got married in '70. Had two children at first. Thought that was the end of the story. But up popped 17 years later, my 3rd child. The last 30 years of my life, I spent as a social worker, even though I started off as a teacher. To digress a little bit and go back, at Charlotte High, I was a member of the National Honor Society, the National Thespian Society, and the National Teachers Association. Today, I'm supposed to be retired. Every time I say I'm retired and anybody runs across me, fine, I'm still working, again, as a teacher. So that has brought you a little bit up to date to where I am now, and we'll see from the rest of it.
Mr. Ron Middleton.
Well, I had the luxury of being born, raised here in Charlotte County. Went to 3 schools here in Charlotte County. We started at Baker Academy at one location, then we moved to another location, and then I went on to Charlotte High. Eventually went to Bethune-Cookman, graduated in 1970. Recruited by, it was amazing to me. I was going to, I had a job offered to me in Ocala, and Mr. James B. Lawless, he came up and said, I want you to come back home. And I thought about it, I said, okay. And I came back here in 1970, taught the Charlotte County school system. Now I'm a center coordinator at the RCMA Child Daycare Service. I know it's going to be some more questions, and we can get in, and then I can tell you, you know, anything that you want to know about. I also was voted in the National Honor Society Charlotte High School, 1964. A member of the football, basketball, track, baseball team. Voted Senior Athlete of the Year in 1966. I think that's all I can
Ron and Gertha, if you could talk about your experiences in segregated institutions when you were at all black schools. What challenges did you face? Did you know that the facilities you had were nowhere near what the white schools had?
Well, at that time, I was, you know, I did 1st through 9th grade in all black facility, and it was small classes. Like I graduating class at middle school, what they'll say now, we had 9 kids. So it's a real close bond. And we, you know, at that time, we always looking forward to riding the school bus. You know, so we said, cause you know, We say, well, look, we finished this year, we're going to Fort Myers, we're going to ride the bus. Then I had an older sister that she did that every morning, and I was tuned up to ride the bus to Fort Myers. Now you know how when you tell a kid, hey, look, we're going to take you to, say, Fun Park, and then they change their mind, and we not going, and the kid get mad. Now, I was tuned up to go to Fort Myers, and when they told me that I wasn't going, and here I am, about 5'1", and talking back to grown people, you know. But we knew.
Thank you, Ron. I guess to add to that, we could all say that. It was an experience because that's what we were tuned up for in those days. That you were going to ride the bus to Fort Myers, and I was the outside kid more or less anyway. And by the way, my class was 15. And to catch the bus was a big deal because it was getting out of town and we were going to have new experiences in the city. Fort Myers was the city then. Such as it is, I said, when you're that small, you're very closely knit. Everyone knows everyone else, you know, and most of your families were, Heidi said, just like family, everyone in town. You know, you couldn't do anything on Fitzhugh that your mama didn't hear about over on Ida Street, did they? And we didn't have telephones that much. I don't know how that message got around so fast. But we knew we had to respect older people. We knew we had to respect any adult person in the community. That's what we brought to the cultural thinking when we entered Charlotte High. And fortunately enough, back in those days, the school system was still rather small. Everybody, you know, when you got us all together, I think by the time I graduated, it was like maybe a total of 73 graduates. So I'm sure that's a very big difference in what the class is this year. But it was rather easy to kind of get to know everyone. It's true that not many of us disagreed, but we had that main Southern simple cultural level. You were black, and even though you didn't fight with the ones that were on the other side, we had a little difference there. There was a line, spoken or unspoken. There was definitely a line. But to overcome that, thank God, when they chose to put the 5 of us in there, we all came from very strong Christian families. And we were not the militant type. We didn't understand always. There were times, many times, I'm sure Ron can say, that when you're a child at that age, being affected by attitudes that your close-knit community didn't have, to be affected by the other side. We saw you downtown and we knew almost everybody in town. Whether you want to say that you were on the Caucasian side or the black side, it didn't matter, because my daddy was the greens man in town, and black or white, you knew my daddy. Mr. Haddock said it didn't make any difference to him. So we didn't come with a simple or cultural level that we looked bad at each other. It was just a matter of learning how to get along. And I think we did a pretty good job, because we didn't have a lot of the problems that other areas did, but there were different feelings, and we can talk about that too also.
As students there, did you find that there were certain areas of the school that felt uncomfortable or off limits? Were there, not to name names of teachers, but were there certain classes that you were fearful of, or certain events that you were fearful of? Homecomings, dances?
More like events. I've always believed they chose me because I looked like the football player. I was already 5'11" and over 260 pounds. So it didn't matter to me if you wanted to mix it up. Well, there were certain areas, yes, that you had a lot of fear because you didn't have any experience doing certain things. But I think we all were rather an outgoing group. We had the experience in church, you know. I don't know if you know very much about black churches, but from the time you're 2 years old, they start sticking you up in front of an audience. So, you know, it didn't matter that way as far as meeting people. And if you gave us a chance, we were ready to get along with you for the most part. There were some that, and I guess there will always be to the end of time, you will never ever get along with. And those are the ones that you learn different ways of how to handle.
Ms. Baker, Mr. Middleton, Ms. Robinson, did you feel any danger when you went to events at other schools, football games or athletic events, or went to Fort Myers or up north to Sarasota County? Were there times where getting, as we just saw, where getting on the bus could be dangerous, not because of the people on the bus with you, but because of where you were going?
My first year, you know, because of the surrounding, where I was, how I grew up, and when I know that somebody got my back, you know, that's what really like made me feel safe. Because you know, when I go to other high schools, like to play football or basketball, and it was the same guy that I played football with. And it was just like me being in an all-black school. And I'll tell you an incident that happened at Charlotte High. We had a football jamboree. Everybody knows what that is. We just had an inter-squad game amongst ourselves. That first game, I was in 10th grade. Now I practiced with these guys at Charlotte High for about 2 weeks. I didn't know everybody on the team. But just like you say, it's a certain group that didn't want it. They didn't want it. That night, after the game, in the locker room, 2, 3 guys that didn't want it came in the locker room and they told me, say, look, we're gonna beat your black so and so and so. And I told the guy that was with us, I said, look, we're gonna have to fight. But I'm thinking all the time that if we get in a fight with these 3, it's going to be the whole football team. And I'm going to tell you what happened. And I'll never forget this guy, Wilkerson. Robert Wilkerson. Robert Wilkerson stepped up and said, look, if you bother them, you're going to have to come to us. And that's what made, and I never forgot it, and that's what made me say it when we go to all other schools. And see, you was having problems over the state of Florida, integration-wise. You had problems. So, you know, I was expecting that, and I was one of the ones Ms. Baker was talking about. I was in Delaware, and they told me I was going to Charlotte High, and I told them no. But, you know, I couldn't tell Daddy no. He put me on the bus, and I was back, you know. But just the idea of knowing that somebody had your back and was on the same level, that's what helped me.
I can't add too much to that. Just say that there were events that I went to because we really didn't. We didn't have any problems. Being a thespian, you know, have too many problems when we went to other places. But I'll tell you, Miss Baker, we didn't want to go to Charlotte High because y'all didn't have the marching band and the football team we had at Dunbar High in those days. I mean, Dunbar could have almost challenged FAMU in the marching department.
Ms. Robinson and Mr. Middleton, after graduating from Charlotte High, going on to the equipment and taking classes in college, do you have experiences that you had here at Charlotte that better prepared you for college? Were there experiences from the process of going through integration that gave you inner strength that helped you when you had to study for those all-nighters for those exams in college? And have later life as well?
Yes, I have to say so. But it's for sure, there was one cultural idea that we had that we thought we had to study so much harder to keep up from coming from an all-black school going into this desegregation. But I can't say that because my parents were pretty strict about studying. I didn't know whether you were black or white either way. And until my mother was satisfied that you knew what you were talking about, she didn't let you up from the table anyway. Yes, there were certain subjects perhaps that we had to delve into a little more than we had in some of our schools. I had the advantage of foreign languages, maybe a disadvantage at the time. I don't know if you remember Mr. Ogilvy.
Yes, I do.
The Tennessee Hillbilly who taught Spanish. And then they told me, that's not Spanish exactly. But anyway, yes, we were prepared to, how you say, maybe not all-nighters, thank God for, and his blessings, and when you chose some of the brighter students, you don't always study as long maybe as some other students have to study until you hit that challenging point, and then you just knew you had to buckle down to it. And that was the advantage of having strong Christian families in the first place. And the town being small, you know, I don't think we were dazzled so much going off to school because we went to bigger cities. It was just more or less that time and period of life that we knew we had to try to accomplish. We were reared with one thing in mind, that life was definitely a challenge, and that you had to, if you were going to accomplish something, and we were reared with that idea, every one of us, not one, but every one of us needed to accomplish something.
I had a similar experience, and just like I was saying earlier, that we don't plan our life. I had an experience at Charlotte High where it was 5 of us, so you know, we wasn't in the same classes. I was in a class with probably about 18, 19 other kids, and I was always the one pointed out. He'll say, you know, he'll give quizzes during the day, and he'll say, well, Ron made such and such on this test, and he always said to the student, when I got my grades, he'll tell them, like, but then that same class, I had the same class in college, and I was prepared, and today, if I didn't have that class back there, I'd have been in trouble because of what, you know, I'm a child care center director now, and dealing most with Hispanics. And sometimes they think, you know, that I'm, they say, you from Mexico? I said, no. But, I mean, you're talking over 30 years ago, I had Spanish class. And now it's helping me today. And at the time, I wanted to get out of the class, but I was prepared when I went there because he was going to point me out. He was going to point me out. And then when I graduated, when I graduated from Charlotte High School, I think he was the first one that came up and shook my hand. But then I wanted, Miss Well, don't know, but I always thought about the classes that, it was some people that wanted us to fail. They wanted us to fail because of the classes that I had when I was in 10th grade, and I look back now, I never would have signed up for them classes. But if you know my mom and dad, you know that they're gonna push me. And I'll tell you another experience. First time I went to college, you know, I'm thinking I'm 17 years old, and I said, look, I don't want to go to college. I went to college playing football the first week. I came home on the bus, and when I got home Saturday, I didn't want to tell Dad, look, I don't want to go to college. He told me, say, you going, mister. And when he told me that, I went, you know, I'm glad. You know, that I had the parents that I had. I'm glad of that.
Good. Mr. Middleton, Ms. Robinson, as you returned from college to Charlotte County, did you notice changes? And if so, what changes were they?
Perception. Not so much changes in the first few years when we were returning. Well, the biggest change was by the time I came back from college, because I'm a couple of years ahead of him, that now the entire county had been desegregated. From the original 5 and then another 5 or 6 or 7, and they did it gradually for desegregation. So by the time I returned from college. The entire community had been integrated into either the elementary school, middle school, and high school. So we were no longer a separate county school system.
You know, it was a little tension still. A little tension still, you know, in the community. Some people still didn't want it. But it was something that they couldn't do anything about. And with the smooth transition that we made, and you know, they preached to us, you know, in the meeting when, you know, we met with board members, and they said to us, don't fight, don't fight. They steady said that, and Mr. Booker T. Haynes, and that's what he was saying all the way to the school, don't fight. So, you know, we had to take a lot. We took a lot. I took a lot, because I know I had a quick temper. I knew I had a quick temper, and I didn't want to go anyway. So we took a lot, but we took that, and I'm glad that we did it, because there wasn't no fights. It was just a smooth transition because of everything that was going on in the state of Florida. We figured it was going to be an outburst, and they just kept preaching to us, don't fight, don't fight. And it was just a smooth transition, and they couldn't believe it. I think all over the state.
Yeah, just before that, I have to say that really helped me, because at Bethune-Cookman, believe it or not, now this was supposed to be practically an all-black college. The transition that we made here in Charlotte County helped me get through the first year at Bethune-Cookman, when there was a lot more desegregation further north in the state, and they were doing riots in '65 when I got to Bethune-Cookman. We were doing sit-ins at lunch counters and other areas, because there were other areas of Florida did not fought being desegregated a lot quicker, entirely up to, actually, believe this or not, until '74, right there in Arcadia, when I first started working with the state of Florida, is that we still were battling desegregation. If you went into a restaurant in Arcadia, they could not say that they couldn't serve you, but they brought you 3-day-old barbecue and 2-day-old bread, more or less.
Ms. Robinson, Mr. Middleton, are there any teachers that you remember from your elementary days, middle school, high school, that you'd like to just, for the record, say anything about as teachers yourselves?
When elementary and middle school, so to say, middle school, Miss Bailey, Miss Bailey, I would say Miss Smith, because I think Miss Smith got me online. Miss Nettie Mae Smith, she got me online, first grade teacher. I go in the classroom, she told me something to do, and I said I'm not going to do it. And Miss Smith said, hold your hand out. She had an army belt. She hit me with the army belt. And it stung, you know. So I said, okay, to myself, going home, I'll tell my daddy. When I went home and told daddy, she said, well, what did you do? I said, I told her I wanted to do. He beat. So, for that happened in first grade, I never was expelled. I never was late to you know, elementary school, high school. I've never been suspended. And I think that she was a big influence on me. And then the other person was Gus Barton. Some of you remember Gus Barton. I wanted to be like Gus Barton. He was born and raised in Charlotte County, went on to college, come back, and he coached us. And Coach Barton kept us in line. And I want to say one other thing, too. When I was telling you about the incident in the locker room in football, all those guys that was in my class has gone on doing great things with their life. And I think that's why a lot of, you know, the easy transition was made at Charlotte High. Those guys that I knew had my back. I mean, the businessmen here in Charlotte County, some of them moved out of Charlotte County, they doing well. And I think that's why it was so easy here.
because of the determination of all the members of the county. For the teachers, I have to agree with Ron, is that, yes, we cannot ever say enough or forget Nettie Mae Smith, because not only did she have us, well, you know, back in those days, you had 2 grades together, too. So Miss Nettie Mae was the principal, and I believe she was the only, really, at that time, the only black principal, or female principal that we had in Charlotte County, and for years to come. And not only did she have me in 1st grade, she became my first mentor when I became a teacher. And we learned a lot from Miss Smith. The original 3 black teachers, we have to give them all of the credit in the community, especially they were Mrs. Bailey and Mrs. Clemens. You just had them so long, you couldn't forget them, you know. 1st and 2nd grade, 3rd and 4th grade, 5th and 6th grade. And they were the original 3 main black teachers that we had that influenced us through those first formative years of our life. I didn't forget Mr. Ogilvy, did I? Because I couldn't forget him with his... There were several other teachers in high that made an impression. I still remember Mrs. Munson, who was the home ec teacher at the time. Mrs. Green, I don't know if she's still around or if she has gone on yet. But Mrs. Green was the holy terror of the English department. You either were going to learn English or you were going to learn Latin. So the choice was English. I will say this in closing, is that it was a different experience. Now that we look back, something like 40 years, 40 years later, is that what was frightful then, we see the way that it has become today. Some things are better, some things are not so good, and some things we still need to work on. But I think that that is a comment on human nature, not desegregation. We will always have to work and learn how to get along. I don't care what color you are or where you're from. The transition here in Charlotte County was a good experience because it could have been a lot worse. We could have been like students in Alabama or Mississippi that lost their lives. But I do have to say thank God for guiding the paths and the minds of the people of this county that helped us to get where we are, and hopefully that we are families that are rearing children to go further than we came from.
Well, just to summarize a little bit about the experience in Charlotte County, and again, this is a wonderful story, not just because we have people who are involved as students, as teachers, but also because it really represents a much different story than what you see in much of Florida. In my home county of Pinellas County, we went through some early attempts at desegregating schools in the 60s, but we didn't even get our act together until the federal courts in 1971 made us get our act together. And we had groups such as Parents Against Forced Busing who were arguing left and right. We had protests at a high school named Dixie Hollins, not for the song Dixie, but for a school superintendent with that name, where the mascot was the rebel flag and the rebel gentleman. 3 and 4 years after school desegregation began in that county, we had 200 National Guardsmen at 2 of the high schools because people were fighting left and right. This is one county to the north. Hillsborough County, Tampa is another good story, full of tragedy. Jacksonville, Duval County, Miami, and many of the smaller rural counties of North Florida, they had a difficult time. Not to mention places as far away as Boston, in larger cities in northern areas, where court decisions and attempts to desegregate schools often were met with violence well into the 1970s, and in some cases into the 1980s. Yet here, 20 years earlier than that, people quietly got together, looked at what was going to be in the best interest of the community. And the analogy of the spokes are very important because it was a wheel that worked in order. Again, if a wheel's not balanced properly, it's not the kind of wheel that you want to have on your car. But the wheel that was driving the people here was a wheel to try to move us in a better direction. Through a lot of difficult times, The 5 who were chosen because they had the strength to make it happen. And I agree, they are the reason that it was successful. They had a lot of help in the background. Their families, their religious institutions, their churches, the teachers, and the many others who really helped it all come together. And it's a testament to their good work that we can all be here today and enjoy our brotherhood of time together this afternoon.
What time of you actually walked into school? Did you need to have armed guards and were there? Did you go through the gauntlet of screening people and all of that, like you see red pictures on TV and
No.
nothing like that?
No. You had 2 or 3. 2 or 3 saying, nigger, they always use that word, nigger, go home. And see, but we respected our elders, and our elders told us don't respond to it, just keep going. Because they look, we go in, we go into our classes or whatever, do not respond because that's going to incite something. So we had to take all of those comments and go on about our business. And it was just a handful. Just a handful. That's Charlotte. I can't remember the number. I know I had about 140 seniors when I graduated. So I don't know the amount of kids that was there. It was a bunch. I know it was a lot, but it was just a handful. And then they turned, and that's the funny thing. And 3 years. First year they didn't want to accept it. Then the 3rd year, the same guys, my senior year, we became friends. The same ones who didn't want it. The 3rd year, we became friends.
I think that's what was most important. 2 officers, I said, when we walked through, there were just a few, just a handful. And they were outside on, they said, because we didn't have to have armed guards, we had our parents. And if I remember correctly, because Mr. Haddock and Mrs. Haddock were on each side of me. And I think Ron and his parents were there. And
No, my mom and dad didn't go because they trusted. Well, you would say my mom and dad wasn't there, but, when the Booker T was there, like my dad is.
Miss Thomas, so right. It was a few parents that came that first day. And you have to remember, that first day was only almost a little bit difficult day. And when we walked through, we had enough representation where we felt comfortable that an adult was there. And of course, we knew that the other adults were there, but like we said, we didn't have very much. There were a few comments. And guess what? Today, there are always a few comments. So what difference does it make?
Middleton,
Yes,
you came back and taught at Charles High School.
Yes, ma'am. 1970, I
Pass the microphone over. Talk a little bit about that.
1970, I taught 1 year. 1 year at Sally Jones Elementary, and then they brought me over to Charlotte High School. I was the first black teacher to teach at Charlotte High School.
Did you come here right after you graduated from college?
Yeah, I came right after I graduated. Mr. Lawless came up, they have the, I'm trying to think of what they call it now.
The recruiter,
Yeah, he came all the way to Daytona and he told me he wanted me to come back home. And back then I said, well, look, I can save money. Because during that time, the starting salary of a teacher was $6,500 a year. And I said, well, look, I can save a little money and then I can get me another car. So I came back, and when I went to Charlotte High, I stayed at Charlotte High for, I think, 14 years. 14 years. But track coach, I was head track coach assistant. I was a head track coach assistant, football coach, and that same year that I left, a good friend of mine, Wally Kelly, had stepped to me and he was going to make me assistant basketball coach.
Fine. The year before was when the Supreme Court happened. Second year school, and as he said, with all the different speed the next year, which could be an eternity. And it seemed to me like Charlotte County was not going to do it for an eternity. And actually, I'm glad Charlotte County did it the way they did. But in the process, what they did, they really dodged a bullet, because they were prime. They were a prime school here to be forced to be integrated simply because they were busing children out of the county to another county to continue their education. When I came along, my last year at Charlotte County schools was, I think, in 1944. And once they gave you a 9th grade education, you're on your own. If your family did not have the means to send you away, or you didn't have relatives someplace else where you could go to continue your education, you were just left out. And in later years was when they started to bus to Fort Myers. But in the process of busing kids to Fort Myers, I had a sister who was much younger than me, and all those kids that went there, what I had heard a lot of people talking about, they're not going to bus my kids here or there or wherever, but take into consideration the fact that there were black children living on Boca Grande Island, and there was no bridge across Boca Grande from Gasparilla at that time, across Gasparilla Sound at that time. They had to catch a ferry to come through Placida, catch a school bus at Placida, and come to Punta Gorda through Englewood, via Englewood, because they had to pick up kids in Englewood too. Come to Punta Gorda, board the school bus, and pass right by Charlotte High on the way to Dunbar High and Fort Myers. And in doing so, it didn't give the kids an opportunity to participate in extracurricular activities unless they could provide for their own transportation or had friends that they could stay overnight with. You know, during those years when my brother and my sister went to Dunbar, and some of the ones before these kids came along, Dunbar was made up. The football team was one of the best in the state. It was made up of guys from Punta Gorda. And they had more discipline. The parents, the kids from here were well disciplined, and all the teachers that were instructors that they had over in Fort Myers, they made comments about the kids from Punta Gorda. They would rather have them than any of the other kids that came in. But to get back to the story about Carol wanted me to say about my sister, I think it was, I don't know what year, I guess it was 62, 63, early 63. I told my sister, I said, well, you know, next year we're going to go, and you and I are going to go and register at Charlotte High. I said, I'll go with you. Will you go? So she said, yeah. So my mother heard the conversation, and she said, you're not taking my baby anyplace. If you want to take somebody to Charlotte High, you get some children of your own. You can take them anywhere you want to. And besides, both of you are crazy.
It was not a part of the process. Our parents were. You know, I knew my parents were meeting with other people, and it was very secretive for maybe a year or two. It didn't just happen. And she told me about what they were doing, but I didn't know it would affect me, you know. So so they met secretly around town with I guess the superintendent of schools and stuff like that. So but when it came down to, I guess they chose the people that were going, which was 5 of us. We lived to get to Dunbar. That was it. And then that summer, they had a meeting and called us all in. And my mom had told me my dad and mom told me, you know, you're going to be going to Charlotte High School. And I about died. It had nothing to do with a black or white issue in my mind. It was not, I don't want to go to a white school. It was not about that. It was about you live to get to Dunbar, because that's where everybody was, and that was the happening. We had no choice of whether we were going to Dunbar or not. If your parents said you was going, you were going. You had no decision in that. And back in that day, you just did what they say. Don't ask no questions. They had a big meeting, and they told us what we had to do. When you go there, there can't be any fighting. We couldn't get in any trouble regardless of what anybody did to us. Our grade level had to be not under a C+. Maybe at the time, you know, it's a different grading level now. Never could come under a C+ for the entire year. And we were kind of, I guess you would say we were behind, because at the predominantly black school, we never got new books. We got the books, say Charlotte High had 9th grade. If they changed books, then we got the books. Charlotte High in the day, and when we got through, we came home, you know, kind of did your home, you guys kind of did whatever you need to do at home. You got to play maybe an hour or so, and you met the black teachers that was there, and they would alternate. You would meet them at the recreation center at 7 at night, and you went from 7 to 9 at night, 5 days a week. And so that we could keep up with what we had to do. They would help us with understanding and stuff like this here. So you know, kind of went to school twice a day. But that only lasts for about a year. Okay. You know, and after that, you know, we were kind of on our own, because we had proved that we could be there.
Isaac's father recalls walking with his son that first day.
There was just crowds and crowds of people on both sides, and all of the school children were just all up down the stairs, you know, and we had to walk up the stairs with our kids' children, and I was really afraid I didn't know what going to happen. And then that's a little room we can walk. All of this was crowded from the ground right up to school, and it was kind of felt like something we had, but it didn't. Everybody was good.
I was so scared. I was so scared. My dad is the one that took us to school that day, and he parked, and the school wasn't like it was now. It just, that main building that they fought to keep, it was just that building, and the cafeteria was on the side. That was all of Charlotte High, and the gym. That was Charlotte High. So you're parked out in front, and people were across the street, was lying there across the street. The students were on both sides of the sidewalk, and it was like walking to your death, sort of, you know, because you just walked. But actually nobody said anything, and believe it or not, it was not the students as a whole that was the trouble. It was the adults. It was adult parents that morning that was saying things and stuff like this here across the street. The kids, we walked from that sidewalk, in front of that sidewalk, all the way up to that building to go in and it was packed with students on both ends. and we never heard one word. It was like quiet as a board. All the heckling was coming across the street from adults. Well, when we did get to Charlotte High, we were kind of like, you kind of like isolated, you know. You were isolated, so you didn't really know what was going on. I really didn't understand the after-school programs and stuff like that. Our most enjoyable day, time of the day in school was lunchtime, because they didn't have it like now. You go at different times. We kind of all went in. It was a lot smaller. You kind of went to school, all went to lunch at the same time. So then, regardless of whether we were separated, it was like, hey, we all could come together in our little hubble, in our little table together. There was fights, but you never fought on the school campus. So, and it was just a certain set of people. When, you know, they would attack us in the hall or spit on us in the hall and stuff like that. And I would say a very small set of people, but they were always there, you know. And but everyone else didn't bother with you, or just spoke, or didn't speak. They just didn't bother with you. So and then, you know, you knew the ones when you started going down the hall were like, oh my God, help me not, because you knew they was gonna bump you, spit on you, or call you a bad name or something like this here. So you just did that. So what happened was, as we made friends, some other friends told us, hey, listen, they set it up. You know, you want to fight, then where now, I guess, all where they park and all where the football field, all of that was woods. You know, it was just woods. So when you came out of that main building, it was a parking lot, and all the rest of it was woods. So you would meet after school over in the woods. It wasn't a whole lot, and it was just a small set.
It turned out that involvement in extracurricular activities was the key to assimilating into the school community.
And that lasted for maybe a couple of months in school, and then we were able to get on the football team. So once we got on the football team, there was meaning, because the guys on the football team wanted us to be a part, and, you know, not bragging anything, but we had 3 guys, so, and all was pretty good, and we were probably the fastest people on the team. So we were asset to the football team. So the guys kind of galvanized around us. We made friendship. I mean, you made a friendship. And when we started to make a friendship, we became a part of the school, because if those guys started talking with you, then other people would start talking with you. So once we got on the football team, you know, our companionship, knowing people, began to expand. You know, because they said, "Oh, you playing football now? Yeah, da da da." So that was a conversation. Or one of the guys knew here, and this was his girlfriend, and so then she started talking. So, you know, by December, January, we were, you know, we knew people. You still had troubles, but you had jail. You had became a part of. We became a part of the school instead of just going. Looking back now, I didn't know it at the time, but we were the only school in the state of Florida that had integrated, so that wherever we went to play football, it was hell. It was just really, it was pretty scary. You know, they would storm the locker room. A lot of times, you know, you had to get on the bus and get down because they had to break all the windows out of the bus, you know. And many times, but I tell you what, Charlotte High and this county stood by us because we had integrated. Many teams, Fort Myers, Arcadia, they just refused to play. Charlotte High stood up and went to the, I don't know what it is now, Florida Football Association. So then, if they didn't play us, then their season was canceled. I mean, so the county really got behind us. Hey, we're integrated. These guys going to play. When they would storm the locker room, kick in the locker room, and want to come in and fight like this here, and you know, and a lot of times police wasn't there. Yeah, I don't know why, but they was not there, and they could just snatch the door on, and when they come in, the coaches would be in the front. The football team would always push us to the back, and a lot of times they, you know, the other guys on the football team, they would, if anything would happen, they had to go through all the rest of the team. I'm telling you. That's many nights, many Friday nights, you know. So we stood as a group. You know, they just could not have controlled what other people did. You know, but the guy that was in the band, he had some troubles in Arcadia. I tell you what kind of way this county was. They went to Arcadia. And they had the which they still have the rodeo every year, and they had a big parade, and they went to Arcadia to march, and the band got off the bus to march, and they said, you can't march in here with this black guy, and they didn't call him black. You know, the whole band got back on the bus, and then after that year. And they went back to the school board. I don't know what happened, but whatever, they went to the school board. They voted to bring everybody that was being bused back to Charlotte High.